All right, everybody. As I just finished getting the chat set up for today's table, one second. Apparently, this is not working. One second. Apparently, it did not grab the right thing. That's good.
Chat is apparently
There we
all of us again.
go. There we go. All right, so welcome everybody to the Game Dev Roundtable chat here on the Game Wisdom channel, where each month myself, along with our panel, will discuss a topic regarding game design or game development. This will be for the month of March 30th or March 2021, and it's been a very busy and hectic month to say the least. So I unfortunately had a cold last week that kind of knocked me out, and Shark I think is not feeling on his A game right now as well. So
Oh yeah, I've been sick for the last month.
Oh man.
Yeah, well he's again, being sick is no fun to say the least here.
Yeah, and I was especially sick the last 2 days because I had too much sugar intake and my blood pressure spiked.
Oh man. As I age, sugar is more and more punishing for my system.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing well, but my father died today of COVID.
Yeah, sorry to hear about that.
That's terrible news.
Yeah, it is.
I get Tomo's window nice and organized too. There we go. Yeah, so it's been one of those, I guess, horrible times all around. So, at least in a small positive, we'll be talking about something that will be considered a positive, and that is the growing roles and the growing importance of diversity when it comes to game development and how it can impact things and make things better. So, before we get to that, as always, let's do our quick around the table. So, we'll start with myself, we'll go to Tomo, Ramin, and then Shark. So, of course, I am Josh Beiser from Game Wisdom, and I talk about game design and industry topics. I am now up to 4 books on design written, and my 5th and 6th books are in the stages of being all locked down for free-to-play and CCG design. So, up to you, Tomo.
Hey guys, my name is Tomo Moriwaki. I've been a game designer for 23-ish years. I always say a different number there because I always forget a little bit. I am the co-founder of a small dev studio called Hyperkinetic Studios, and my claim to fame is being the creative director on Spider-Man 2 from 2004.
My name is Ramin Shahrizad. I am a former neuroscience researcher and a game designer that went back to school for economics and then put it all together to create game neuroeconomics. And I'm building games that incorporate neurometrics and game economics to make games that better meet the needs of humans.
And I'm Sharky Shark, also known as Jim Tickersley, seeking the betterment of shark video games, and also the CEO of Nexus Games. And currently, my claim to fame is absolutely nothing, but hopefully soon to be my current game, Neon Continuum.
And you better have that finished before I start writing my book on free-to-play design, or I'm going to have to say so many bad things about the game in it.
And that is pay to win?
Mm-hmm.
You've already been saying that, though.
So is everyone around. But that will be a topic for another day. For our chat tonight, though, we're going to be focusing on talking about diversity when it comes to the game industry. Now, I know for myself, I haven't really had a chance to work in any kind of like company role and things along those lines. I think, Shark, you've been more like independent side as well, correct?
Yeah, I've never worked in a studio. I've only formed my own studio, which has been, my bedroom and the bedrooms of the people who work for me.
Mm-hmm. So I think for this cast, I think Tomo and Rami will be kind of taking the lead, as both of you have obviously had studio experience, and especially working with a variety and a diverse group of people. So I guess the first question then, and this can be either one of you can start the answer for this one. I guess, given like the amount of time that both of you have spent in the industry, I guess, have things improved at all? Because we've seen people say all kinds of things online about how, diversity is bad, diversity is really good, diversity is going to, lead to better projects. And again, the game industry is famously known for being very rapid in terms of developing new practices and new standards. But this is something that I think that it still is very much in the early days. So, either one of you want to start? Feel free.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, I've had a lot of experience on lots of big teams, and since '97, and so I've really had a chance to see the kind of, I mean, it feels like a slow transition to my 2 decades, as seen from my perspective. But I think in the grand scheme of things, change has been really rapid. Um, you know, I think just from the perspective of women working on the teams that I was on, I saw a pretty significant shift over time. And um, I feel like, you know, as you said, how the industry is very rapid, it also means then rapid changes in the team compositions. It means rapid changes in the audience. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the most important trajectories is like heavily boosted by kind of the Facebook games and mobile games explosion. From like starting around maybe let's say 2007.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that the audience for games when I started was small
Mm-hmm.
and sort of North America focused in a way and console focused. Um, and in a lot of ways, you know, the people making the games were making it for their own demographic. And then and the people that were making the games were coming out of the demographic that was playing them. And it was small and it wasn't being observed too closely by the rest of society. But you can't help it. Once everybody plays games, now you need to understand everybody, and so you very rapidly saw a little bit of culture clash as we
Mm-hmm.
as we kind of expanded um, both the user base and those who were developing games. I'll start with that one.
Okay.
I would say that despite the population, despite the increasing diversity of our consumer base, uh, I've not really seen a significant change in the diversity of the people making computer games.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge lag there. Uh, I think that there's not even a clear understanding that the diversity of the team can help improve the bottom line by making products that better fit the target demographic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think you're seeing an increase in the number of companies that are openly being sued because of diversity or harassment issues. But I would also point out that for every company that you know of that's being sued, there's somewhere between 100 and 1,000 companies that are being sued, and then there's a settlement, and then a non-disclosure agreement, and then you never hear about those types of issues.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I think that there's more demand for diversity, and that's probably resulting in more quiet litigation. But the more, just like in the movie industry, the more that results in non-disclosure agreements, that doesn't really mean anything's going to change. It becomes an increasing cost of doing business in the industry.
Yeah, it's interesting though because I feel like if the culture of development isn't advancing along with the needs of its audience, that's an opportunity, right? That means we
Mm-hmm.
can take advantage of our industry's unwillingness to change as quickly as it should, and reap sort of the cheap benefits of trying to support diversity, at least in our own team situations.
Well, it's an opportunity for independent developers if they
Mm-hmm.
take it. You're not going to see that type of agility in the larger companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Ramin, about independent developers because that I think has been one of the major pushes over the last 10 years from the independent scene, and by the very fact that you don't have to worry about company culture or pressure from the outside when you can make whatever kind of game you want. And we have certainly seen just so much variety from independent developers, not just in terms of the games they make, but in terms of, their nationalities, the stories they want to tell. I've spoken to developers from, I have a contact I made from Jamaica. I know several developers from India. I know a few from, I think, China or South Korea. And the beauty about independent development is that it really has opened up the door to allow everybody to try and get in and make these games.
Yeah, I think what's important is that the people who work on the games want to work on the games. They want to be on in the games industry, and they are qualified to be in the position they're in. Doesn't matter if they're programmer, artist, or whatever position. Just they need to be qualified for such position, or else the game's quality is going to lack because of that.
I think a piece of this puzzle that's really important to me, and it's not the same as the public discourse around diversity, is just an open-mindedness in the group's collaborative state. And the more every individual has an open mind to kind of explore perspectives that they may not have right in this moment, the more likely the group is going to be able to navigate really what amounts to a brutally complex space as you try to compete with all the other products that are constantly spreading up all around us. Honestly, from just from a mental agility standpoint, the diversity along every conceivable axis, at least from like my selfish attitude is I want diversity of every conceivable accessible that's every axis I would prefer to have diversity upon, and I'd like me to have access to it so that I can take advantage of the benefits that diversity actually confers to the thought process of the group.
And go ahead, Ramin.
I see a couple competing things here. I mean, the traditional way that non-white males would be blocked from access to studios was the culture test. And the culture test is a way of seeing, do you fit? Do you look like the people in our studio now? Do you act like the people in our studio now? And the culture test is a way of creating homogenous teams. It's a sexy, more politically correct way of saying, we're much more interested in whether you have our same personality than what your merits are. At the same time, I'm seeing the pandemic allowing people to work from home, and now it really you shouldn't really need that culture test so more, because you don't need to get along with everybody at the water cooler. You just need to be able to submit your work product in a timely fashion. So I think that's going to help improve merit-based hires and merit-based retention more than the culture test is used to eliminate the same people.
You still do need to get along with each other, because working with people that you don't get along with just does not result in good things happening. But I mean, like, you don't need to have a 20-hour conversation with this person every day kind of thing. You need to get along. You don't need to be best friends. You know what I mean?
What I like about the kind of what you're saying there, Sharky, is it's like there is one axis where diversity perhaps is not necessary, and that is if we don't need jerks on the team.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
but if you're in the studio every day, and people say, they're asking questions like, who are you dating, or what are you doing after work, or things like this, and they're judging you. But if you're at home, they don't know what you're up to, and they don't really have a reason to really ask you. So it allows that to be. There are many cultures where it's okay to be different as long as you don't talk about it. And the pandemic works for that, because you can have your own life and no one needs to know how weird you are. when you're not in the office, because you're not in the office all the time.
Or in the office at all because you're, pandemic
Mm-hmm.
and online.
And
Yeah, and I think this describes kind of the two sides of this coin, right? One is societal, and one is functional. And the societal edge of it is kind of like, we know, and our industry is representative of kind of cultural values that existed in the past. And as we move forward in the timeline, those cultural values are evolving, and we're just figuring it out a lot better. Because I mean, I was pretty ignorant to a lot of these issues growing up. My joke is that I have more white privilege than the average person.
That might be true.
I mean, well, and a big part of it is just that I never had to worry about stuff, right? In fact, maybe I could call it like my gamer privilege, right? That I was always in the know. I've played all the games. I have no disconnect. I pass very well as a core gamer. And back in the early days, that I was proud of that. It was this thing that is like that's who I am, and I fit or I match very well. But on the functional side of things, like you were saying, homogeneous groups, they're not the most efficient. They're not the most efficient machinery to solve problems.
Nope.
Yep. And like for myself, I also had that kind of gamer privilege as well, especially when it came to talking about Gamergate back in like 2014, 2015. Like I remember I made a post, decrying it, saying all kinds of bad things about it, and the worst I was someone saying, I am deeply disappointed in you, Josh. Like that was the nastiest comment someone said to me about my thoughts on Gamergate. And again, if I was anything else, I think I would have gotten far worse than that. And
I find even just that, I mean, I've created a new studio with two partners, so that I don't have to worry about this cultural thing anymore. We're very pro diversity. We're trying really hard to make as diverse a team as possible. Everybody isn't aligned with that, which is fantastic. But of the three founders, two are male and one is female, which is already more gender diverse than almost every studio on the planet. But even so, most of the time when we're talking, it's the two men talking, and the woman is listening. But which is not my favorite dynamic. But she's brilliant, so I go out of my way to stop the conversation and ask her for feedback or input, because I think if I didn't do that, and in other studios I've been, this absolutely would not happen if I didn't do it. I wouldn't get that input, and having that diverse input can really help me understand how to make my designs better.
Yeah, I mean, I know with my studio, like, I personally don't care what, race, sex, or, whether you're human or shark or anything, I just, are you able to do the job? Am I able to pay you kind of thing? Are we going to be able to work well together? Are we going to be able to get this thing done? If yes to all, then you're good by me, and I always have this hard time when multiple people check all those boxes, and it's like, who do I hire?
And I think that's actually a really good point of something I wanted to bring up. I think Ogora left a comment near the start here about. Oh wait, somebody decided. I guess they decided to unsubscribe. I'm not sure if that was a joke or not, but the comment got flagged. Well, we'll see what happens there. But Ogora left a comment earlier about diversity and, of course, being able to have that merit-based approach. And I think this is one of the things that's. I'm not sure if this is either harder than it sounds or easier than it sounds, especially when it comes to game development. I remember there was like this article, this whole like controversy regarding talking about, are men better game designers than women or something along those lines, and it just seemed like one of those very like,
Clickbait.
Clickbait posts. And when it comes to game development, like it is such a, like, again, we've been doing these roundtables for, I think we're almost going on a year now, or we're getting close to it, and it's the topic that we still don't really have an answer for, like nailing down what is exactly like game development, what does it mean to design a game. And as Shark said, like, if you have like 5 different designers or 5 different programmers and they can all do your task, you know, how do you decide? You just close your eyes and pick from a blind list.
It's hard, and I don't know if I do the right thing, so I don't even know if I want to talk about it because, like, I just get feedback from a lot of people, and talk to them, and try to get down to the nitty gritty kind of thing, and and you know, I have no idea, but what I what was I going to say now? I lost it.
I've only gotten one cold in the last 14 months, and the brain fog from feeling sick was very noteworthy because it'd been so long since I've been sick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The brain fog is definitely real with me right now.
My dark sense of humor says that if you get hired with 5 other people that are just as good at your job as you are, you better start gaslighting on day 1.
Nice. It's interesting. There's something we did at Hyperkinetic Studios, or at least a sentiment we had, where we were recognizing that we were missing people in certain age groups, and that at least, and this is a nice, easy analogy or a nice, easy structure to talk about because people don't usually get into the weeds or they don't get frustrated about conversations along these lines. But, like, for example, as a group, perhaps we didn't know crap about Snapchat. And the people that were living it are always going to know more about it than we would. So having someone in their early 20s on the team started to seem like a real asset, that we're rounding out the knowledge base of our team. And I think that basic structure is true of pretty much all forms of diversity. I think that it's a terrible mistake to think that where a person comes from and their cultural kind of underpinnings, that those aren't relevant features that have real serious benefits to bring to bear. We want to make products that appeal to the largest number of people, and the potential benefit to us in doing so is very significant. And so I've always found the kind of resistance to diversity as sort of a poorly formulated argument.
Yeah. And I finally did remember what I was going to say before, is referring to the females being better game designers. Like, when you think about the way the female mind works compared to the way the male mind works, I could see maybe, females would inherently be better designers because, their mind works, more sort of in that way, in a certain way, because they're more book smart when it comes to a lot of things. But also, I could also see it going the other way, kind of thing, at the same time. So, it's weird, but I don't know if I've seen really all that many female game designers. So, maybe they're not, or maybe they're not interested in that, or what, or maybe I'm just not seeing them. But I generally don't see female game designers. I see a lot of female artists, though. I've seen a few female programmers, but
I really don't want to touch the argument of whether one gender is better than another gender, or whether one race is better than another race, or whether one generation is better than another generation. But I think what's really valuable is including all the above on not only in your studio, but somewhere in your design pipeline. Because I'm going to have a very different perspective than someone who is of a different generation and a different race and a different gender than than I am. And having all those varied inputs means that we can stop a bad idea much earlier than if we didn't have that diversity, or include some very critical aspects, like what Tom was saying about understanding the modern nuances of social media, which I obviously don't understand. And without that insight, I could make some grievous errors and not predict the need for some feature that we need.
Yeah, and excuse me, and I think like to build off also what Tomo said, that it is about getting that first-hand experience, and ultimately, I think what you said about that diversity is a net positive in any way that you want to slice it. I think is an important point that having people of diverse backgrounds, having those different expertise on your staff is a way to improve your game. Because I think, as you said earlier on, I mean, that if it's just one single thought, the whole group thing kind of situation, it usually leads to things becoming very much, stuck in a rut, or you're just repeating the same things over and over again.
Yeah, and I think one of the most places to have diversity is in your playtesters. And when I say diversity there, I don't mean just, different races and, sexes and all that other stuff. What I also mean in that is people who love the genre, people who are all right with the genre, people who hate the genre, and, because like having a diversity in there allows them to point out what parts of that design they do not like, kind of thing, and what parts they absolutely like, which is the reason why my last game was, a tactical RPG, but it was liked by people who did not like tactical RPGs or turn-based stuff, because, people who did not like turn-based and did not like tactical RPGs were included in the testing kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, in the old days, we used to draw testers from our fan base. Whoever was at most active on the forums, we'd send them keys, and that's how we'd fill out the testing for our early MMOs. But then you just get the people who are most likely to understand how your game works already. It's great to be able to see, as a person who's really has very little gaming experience, can they even understand how your game works? Because onboarding is so critical to early retention, and your onboarding has to be completely different for a person who's has limited gaming experience relative to somebody who's been gaming hardcore for 10 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another aspect that I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on was what Tomo was saying at the start about kind of how a lot of these talks have really kind of blossomed with the rise of mobile games and kind of the growth of this casual market. There, like, if you really want to drive a hardcore gamer nuts, besides saying about making games more diverse, you can also say that women make up a huge market of gamers these days, because that the whole casual marketing drove a lot of people crazy over the last like 6-7 years. But the mobile scene, I think, has been a very major aspect of showing that there is a market for beyond the 18 to 30 straight white male demographic.
Don't even get me started on the atrocities involved in mobile gaming advertising.
Oh, yes.
No.
Aimless.
Oh, yes.
I try not to get into too many I guess public conversations about the societal issues, just because they're such hot topics. Although I think maybe in this idea where we're talking about diversity, I think the resisting of diversity is something, it's its own kind of beast at play. There's some amount of coordinated, or just there's some sentiment in the establishment or the status quo that gets the hairs on the back of its neck up on end when threatened with change. And as I was making my way in the early years, I would have never even considered that be a mechanism in what I was doing, because we were changing constantly. I felt like we were chaotic change machines, and so like at least on the outside, on the surface, I embraced change almost for its own sake, and therefore the idea of diversity in its most kind of essential form was absolutely an unmitigated positive. And then kind of as you kind of sink deeper into, because inevitably we are coming from our cultures, and we have DNA, like we have like, I don't know, thought DNA, right? That's born from our social environments. That means we think the same things that our societies think. Um, and then eventually you found the resistance. For me, that was really very much kind of the old school console gamer and game developers' perspective, watching their intolerance of the emergence of Facebook games. In fact, I was very much an active participant in resisting this and saying all kinds of things that I'm embarrassed that I said about them. I think the worst thing I said was, those people shouldn't be allowed to spend money on these games. I just, like, in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I mean, aside from it being sort of an idiotic thing to say, it's very without realizing it, extremely insulting to their own, a person who would choose to do such a thing. And that's not a great way to profit from them, by the way.
Tom, are you self-funded?
Yeah. We fund ourselves via our projects.
So you can say change is good, but from my experience, investors fear change.
Yeah. Well, our society, our existence fears change. I mean, I think it's deep seated and it's packed in there, and to dismiss it, I think, is very dangerous. That's why I like this topic, but like bringing the deeper elements of that conversation to the surface, I think at least it's step one towards figuring it out better.
And yeah, like to Ramin's point, like we've all heard the stories like from like Ubisoft in particular, with stuff like women are hard to animate, so we're not gonna have our main character be a woman. That what was that game? Remember Me, Remember Us, the game that had female protagonists that the studio, like the publisher, was like pushing back against, and they like didn't really want that game to come out. And yeah, it's still, I think like for all the good we can say about from the independent space, it's still like moving at like a slow glacier pace when it comes to the AAA markets.
I would just have to point out that at least Ubisoft has recently partnered with Sorare to make possibly the first AAA level blockchain enabled games, which I think is a pretty big change, even if that change does not speak to any sort of diversity.
Well, no, it speaks to the diversity between the early adopters and the never adopters, at
least. And I think like for this topic, like part of this challenge, I think what Tomo said, I think it was either Tomo or Ramin, now my head's still in that fog too, was something about that they're leaving money on the table. And I think that's another major point about this. That what we've been seeing is that games that do embrace a wider market, not just in terms of things from a studio culture, but in terms of how they're being marketed, whether it's making it more approachable, making it more accessible, whatever, that these games typically have done really well. Whether it's something as simple as, supporting like Xbox's accessibility controller, the accessible controller they released, and even games that have had either female protagonists or allow people to create very personalized characters in all races and genders, has I think done a lot to kind of make these games more inviting to people. Now, whether or not that truly translates to sales, I am not a sales guy. I can't give anyone straight figures on that one.
Yeah, I think there might be something specific too going on in recent times. The new people in any given generation, right, are gonna counter the thing that the last generation is. It seems like, right, in very much parent-child fashion, it's gonna counter what bothers them the most. And so I think we're also seeing as as the new folks roll into their early 20s and they start making games, that they're counterculturing their way into creating products for the rest of the 20 somethings and teens. Oh geez, pardon me. And that it's neat. It's neat to see that, because when I was young, I felt like the counterculture was one thing, and then you see it kind of like jumps around sort of. These issues about diversity, especially, I feel like focusing in some ways on gender and orientation. Um, it's been fascinating to watch how fast that moves. And I have a 16 and 13-year-old daughter, so I get to kind of soak up their perspective. And it's they have how they make the joke. I think it's, even though it's maybe not 100% true, that Eskimos have like 50 words for ice or snow or something, and we only have the one. They have so many words for so many things relating to various ships, basically. And by the way, that's a term that I was able to accommodate, in the course of the last 7 years. That ship means relationship. That dates me, at least, to some extent.
Yeah, you threw me for a loop there. I was like, what, are they into starships? Your daughters sound cool.
And now this cast just reveals how old everybody is.
Exactly. And I think
I know what shipping is.
I think from my
perspective, my comment was going to be is that there probably aren't words; they're probably abbreviations.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I had to make a changeover at some point as I aged, where I needed to take a much more conscious assessment of my default response patterns to various things, and really start picking out the things that I automatically resisted. And not gratify those feelings, rather analyze them and understand. And in the process of doing so, I very much found a very concrete pattern. The things that I immediately resisted tended to be the things that I did not understand.
Yeah.
And they tended to be things that were not present during my earlier years, or at least I was sheltered from, or was otherwise that information or exposure was unavailable.
Yeah.
And that started to paint a very scary picture for me. It's like, oh, wait a second. There are basically information spaces that I'm unconsciously denying myself from access. And then now at that point, now I'm like all real scared almost, right? I'm like, I need that information. What do you mean that my nature is deciding to chase me away from information, which is like, to me, like, the gold of this universe?
Yeah. And to honest, what I was talking about, what is counterculture, what's mainstream? Yeah, that's always a tough topic. And I agree with you, Tomo, as well. Like, I've had a very sheltered life, part by choice and part from having physical disabilities with my right leg. So I really did not get exposed to a lot of what happens in the world, and a lot of my growth has really been over the last 10 years doing more with game wisdom. I think specifically talking to a lot of developers, because I'm so keyed in the indie dev scene. I've talked to just a very diverse group of developers. I've spoken to, all different races and genders over the last 10 years. And a lot of that, I think, has really opened up my eyes to kind of like what's going on. Especially when it comes to stuff like LGBTQ plus rights. I follow a lot of developers who talk about that and talk about their thoughts and experiences. And it really has opened up my eyes to like kind of like what's going on in that culture and kind of the challenges of what it means to be that way.
Yeah, I like those words. I think, there's, it connects this. I want to like describe it in a very fuzzy way, and that there are kind of like conceptual positions that don't leave space to breathe, and then there are those that do. And as time goes on, I'm favoring the ones that have breathing space. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I want to get into something that's a little bit complicated, but I've been noticing that even in a studio that has a mathematical diversity, what you'll tend to see in the studio is that people that are members of a particular minority group, whether that's women or neurodiverse people or a particular race or maybe they're from California, whatever. They will tend to cluster, not only because they can speak more easily to the people that understand their language, their cultural language, but also I think for defensive purposes. That if you attack one of them, you attack all of them.
Yeah.
And so this gives you like a herd defense. But then also, if you're in an environment where there's potentially something going on that shouldn't be going on, and one of those people will speak up, then what can happen is that person can be moved out of that group to another part of the company where they have no support, what we call siloed. And this can be threatening to everybody because not only now that person has no emotional support, no backup, anything can be done to them. They have no defense. But also, the herd will notice that somebody's been dragged off, and probably knows why. So you can't just look at a studio and say, oh, mathematically they look diverse. It can be so much more complex than that, and you have to know you have to really go into the studio and to really understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Something connected to that is what is the sentiment of the leadership, right? That ends up being this kind of really unavoidably essential piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's been one of the things that we've saw, like with some of the allegations, at Blizzard and Riot Games for the last few years, in particular. Especially with Riot Games, they have had it seems like every 2-3 months there's another lawsuit or discrimination act thrown at them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think really you got to look at not just the total spread, but what's the leadership team look like? Mm-hmm. What's the design team look like? These are the decision makers in the studio. Is it possible you have diversity everywhere else, but not at the decision making level? That tends to be my experience, even in diverse teams, that you still don't see diversity at the decision making level.
Yeah, and I think the hope is that if the resistance to diversity can be opened up, that now that diversity can percolate and it becomes more of an established part of the culture. But it's still I think it's a very legitimate problem. It's something that is very worthy of continuing to discuss and continuing to bring up as something to be concerned about.
Yeah. And I think that's also kind of really goes back around to what we were saying earlier about independent developers and the fact that, again, when you're a small team, you are the owner of your small studio, whether it's a 1-person, 10-man team, whatever. And again, that's really afford them that ability to really step up and do these very interesting games. I know a Kid Fox Games, for instance, is a very diverse team. I mean, they're working on a boyfriend dungeon at the moment, and I can just imagine that there's no way in hell a team of aiming at the 18 to 30 straight white male demographic would ever conceive of a game like Boyfriend Dungeon, or even something like that Dream Daddy game that came out a few years ago.
I think that's such a great example because not only is that an inherent diversity, but it's also like a melding of genres that you wouldn't expect to meld.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of diversity from a gameplay or from the actual game design perspective, I have a question I want to throw to everyone, including the chat, whether you're watching this live recorded. Before we do that, as a quick time check, it's about 7:35 my time, so we'll aim to wrap up probably in the next 20 to 25 minutes, if that works for everybody.
That works for me.
Yep.
Okay. So, the question I want to ask, and I think this may actually kind of even segue into free-to-play design as well, has to do with the growing amounts of, I think, calls for greater personalization when it comes to video games. And again, for those of you watching, when we talk about personalization, we're talking about designing the look of your character. So this is not, gameplay or game mechanic related. And I think one of the things I found very interesting, over the last 10 years, we've really seen, I think, more people become conscious about, what kind of character can I make or I can represent in this space? Because if we talk about games 20, 30 years ago, it's basically Do you want to be the stubble white male? Do you want to be the supermodel female character? And that's it. And the question I want to ask everybody is that, do you feel that personalization along these lines, not just going for, age and weight, but, skin, gender, and everything around that, do you think that is becoming more of a standard feature or a required feature for a lot of these games, just given how it seems like it's becoming more and more important for the audience?
I think if a game is built, I think some games are not built to be able to handle that kind of system because, like, think about your normal, JRPG or RPG as I would call it. Anything that is, character focused, like this character has this story kind of thing, you're very much limiting, what you can do there as a personalization kind of thing. But, on games that are not specifically have story tied around them kind of thing, then it doesn't really matter, and you can have, all the personalization you want. But, of course, personalization costs money. Of course, it can also make money depending on your model kind of thing, your business model. So, like, if they have the budget, or if that's, meaningful to their design, they should absolutely have it kind of thing. But if stuff is tied to, story and stuff like that, you shouldn't be forced in there.
I think I shared with you guys an article that a woman was saying that after 16 years, Blizzard now allows you to run a black character in World of Warcraft.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that it doesn't surprise me at all that it took them 16 years to think that was even important to their players, given that Blizzard is almost entirely located at their headquarters in Irvine, California, which is in Orange County, which is traditionally a hotbed of white supremacy. I mean, I'm going to come out and just say it. I mean, they had KKK people on the city council not that long ago, openly. So, I mean, it's still a very conservative area of California, and I'm not saying that everybody there is like that, and it's certainly become a lot more diverse place than it used to be. But I think I went in to Blizzard and just looked at the structure. Who are the decision makers? Who's the leadership team? I suspect you wouldn't see a lot of black people there that would think that, we should allow people like us to be represented in the game. Because right now, it's probably just, until now, it's been just the people who made the game that were represented in the game.
Yeah, in a game like, Blizzard games, I mean, I absolutely, skin color, sex in some cases, because, I think they did a fairly decent job with Diablo kind of thing. But in Diablo, you had, many different characters, and they were different sexes, races, and whatnot. But it's that's I think one of the better examples on that kind of thing. But they they can afford to make multiple, they could make a male and female sorceress, a male and female, of all the classes, and they could easily put in a texture swapper that would allow them to be any race kind of thing. Because it really doesn't matter in a Diablo game, because all that is just, I guess you'd say decoration on the face of the game. And, same goes for World of Warcraft.
Well, it's interesting. There's, I've been having some conversations related to this here and there in the last couple of weeks, actually. And, something I realized that I've been doing a lot lately is that if there's something that doesn't really suit my needs, or maybe something that I'm not that into, it just doesn't come up in my thought process. I just kind of step around it and kind of keep focusing on the things that I kind of care about or like. But we see the pattern, right? That something is out of place and it's bothersome, and
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's bringing up an uncomfortable piece of a conversation, and that really I feel like has been the nature of a lot of this in the early days of my development experience, was that when an issue related to diversity or gender would come up, um, everyone would just get quiet. They're like, "Oh, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
really comfortable with this," and they would want it to end. And I think it's breaking up that discomfort. It's like, come on, we talk about things we're not comfortable with all the time. We have no idea what we're going to do next week. And
Mm-hmm.
if we don't figure this out, we're going to go crash and burn and everybody's going to lose their job. How comfortable are you with that? Right? I mean, we talk about things that are very stressful all the time, but then at kind of a sociological level,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly we become very timid, I guess. And that in the culture of the teams, if you can eliminate that discomfort, now we can just talk about it. Let's figure out the best way to, like, to what extent is this an issue? How do we make the most of it? And we're making micro decisions about those kinds of things all the time, theoretically. Why is it this topic suddenly becomes a stopping point? And I guess team leadership can have a big role to play in this. Um, Imagine if the boss gets uncomfortable if you talk about a certain topic. Let's say the boss gets upset if you talk about shifting the game from a camera on rails to a free camera or something, and you're like, "Oh, we don't talk about that. It's a very uncomfortable topic." Um, and then someone's going like, and then of course, inevitably, then the designers beneath that person are going to be kind of like chit-chatting about that, going like, I wonder why we can't bring up that topic, but it doesn't get fielded, and then the actual problems that might exist in that discomfort don't get addressed, and you don't get good results that way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I hate to come back to Irvine, but both Blizzard and NC Soft have tried to recruit me to work in Irvine recently, and in both cases, I told them I don't feel safe in Irvine, and they were like, "What do you mean? Irvine is completely safe?" And I'm like, if I had a studio in Compton, and I asked you that you said, I want you to work for me, but you would have to come into Compton every day to go to the studio. Would you feel safe? And they were like, but that's different. I'm like, exactly.
Mm. Yeah. And there's a topic that I want to bring up. I'm not sure this may be like too polarizing. I'm not sure if this will be at least too big to discuss. And I just had, I think I may have lost it too while we were having this discussion. But, oh no. Now I'm having it too. This is what happens when we have consecutive sicknesses on the round table.
Mm-hmm.
While I'm trying to think of this, I guess any other topics or any other points anyone wants to make regarding this while I try to think of the one that I want to come up with.
Topics relating to diversity.
Mm-hmm.
I think a little one that obviously comes up quite a bit is representation, right? It's related to the personalization, but the underlying concept I do think is I've come to realize how important it is. I grew up with comic books, big fan of comic books, and I'm used to seeing what I see and liking it, and I remember what it felt like to imagine that the content was being approached in a different way to meet the needs of someone other than myself, let's say. And that sounded like they're changing the core identity of the thing that I like into something new. But as someone who felt, at least at the time, I mean, I think it's worth noting that maybe I didn't see a whole lot of Asian representation out there growing up, but um, it's not. I have to see what I didn't see. I need to take that step to appreciate what the people out there who aren't seeing themselves represented in entertainment and in the media around them, what the disadvantages are. And it's very hard to explain because it's in this negative space difficulty, right? It's you cannot describe what isn't there, or at least it's fundamentally more difficult, right? Our consciousness is good at describing the positive shape of an image, and it's kind of like our unconscious is good at describing the negative space of the image or something.
Yeah. And I mean, we definitely saw a lot of like issues with that when it came to like the comic book industry over the last 10 years as well, with trying to be more diverse, not only in terms of the people writing the stories, but again in terms of how characters are portrayed.
Yeah, and oh my God, his comic books or superhero like mythology has just benefited greatly from stirring things up at the kind of like sociological level, right? That's like they generated controversy, and there's a lot of terrible attitudes perhaps, and we can be upset about them, but the resultant chaos created buzz and attracted a ton of attention. And now it's going every which way. I mean, it seems like it's on a good trajectory, even if, of course, everything is still has a foot stuck in the past.
So I just remembered what I wanted to ask, and so we'll see how spicy this gets, or how
Uh-oh.
much it will cause trouble. Well, cause trouble for me because it'll probably be all up in the recorded version. So you guys won't. You guys will be safe from it. But
So who's ready to cancel Josh?
there we go. Exactly.
Oh, no.
So one of the biggest points when it comes to diversity, especially when it comes to telling stories, is having somebody who actually experiences it. Whether it's a story based on gender, male versus a female perspective, things along those lines. And there's always that argument, or there's that discussion about, you know, can a straight white male write a story that's not about a straight white male? Wouldn't it be better to hire somebody of that specific nationality or gender? And this, I think, has always been one of those, again, very sticking points, especially when it comes to any kind of creative medium. So I'm not sure if there really is a question, or if I gave myself too much trouble asking a question, but I just want to see what are like kind of like the thoughts are on that specific point.
Isn't this just basically another version of blackface?
I mean, at its essence, perhaps. But I mean, I think it also differs. Like, I can write whatever stories I choose to write, right? I'm the author, and I'm the master of my output. It's a little bit different though if I am a large company and I have access to tons of resources, and I want to serve the needs of a particular demographic. Now, it's in the short into right now, you certainly run the risk of being at kind of a PR disadvantage um, by by not bringing on people who give the audience confidence that they know them and
Mhm.
represent that audience segment. And of course, it's like I can't even help it. Every one of my perspectives is it seems terribly inefficient if I were running a large company to not be seeking people who uh, already know and have spent their whole lives knowing um, and understanding how to create cultural resonance with a particular audience segment.
Yeah,
I think that in some ways saying that, and not to resist this, honestly, if you can't do better, just you try to match, I guess, as a starting point. But I think it is a little simplistic to say that we're going to get an Asian writer to write an Asian story. It's
Mhm.
it's really what you're saying underneath it is that you need to find someone that really truly understands. And yeah, it turns out that they're going to tend to be Asian in that case. But I might very well just as be interested in someone who's spent, who has like multiple PhD dissertations on the ancient cultural history of Mongolia, and it turns out to be someone who grew up and lives in Ukraine and just visits a bunch, but is like a foremost scholar of that period of history. Um, but that said, if all things being equal, right now you kind of if let's say inevitably I cannot analyze a person all the way down like to every little detail about them. I have to do my best, and I'm left with uh the it seems reasonable to find someone who gives me the most confidence that they understand the work that they're going to do.
Well, as a writer, you always tend to write from things you've experienced, kind of thing. But your life experiences, include those who have been around you, kind of thing. So, in that terms, I mean, you can write about it, but the thing is how much can you write about it? Are you, somebody who's, actively, spent a lot of time in such a culture, kind of thing, or are you one that's dabbled with it occasionally, kind of thing? And it's a different thing in any place. But like, let me ask you this: who here is an elf? Because there are a lot of stories written about elves, and if writing about a different race is wrong, then we need to cancel probably about half of the people that write
Fantasy
stories. Who here is a dragon, a talking sentient dragon? Who here is any number of these races, kind of thing? But
no, but I think. Oh, go ahead. Go, sorry.
you need to, but you also need to be sure that, if your story is all about Asian culture, kind of thing, you need to be dang sure you know all about Asian culture, kind of thing. Or if it's all about, any other race, you need to be sure that you know about that race or about that, qualification. Maybe you're writing a game about homeless people, kind of thing. You better be sure that you are aware of the homeless situation, kind of thing. You need to be immersed in the situation to be able to write about it in a meaningful way. And that doesn't necessarily directly tie to what you are biologically, but I mean, what you are biologically hence has an effect on what you've experienced and what you've been tied to, and how much knowledge you have of each of these things.
What's interesting is
I
like.
think you're.
Oh,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
But you're bringing up the same topic I've been struggling to articulate here, but I wasn't ready to try to articulate because it's very complex. It's hard to explain. But I think what you're saying is like the difference between like phenotype and genotype. Like you could be black and grow up in a white community and be raised white, and then you could be tapped to be a diverse writer, to represent black culture, and start writing, but what comes out sounds white because culturally you're white, and you wouldn't even feel comfortable hanging out in Compton or talking to people who grew up in black culture.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's not just about how you look; it's about your actual culture, and you can be from look like you're from a culture, but not be. It's just like Tomo talking about Chip. His daughter's culture. In his daughter's culture, that means something completely different than it does in my culture. But I wouldn't get that if because I'm from a different culture. So you can tell the difference when there's an independent film made by a very diverse or minority culture group. That the language they use, half of it I may not even understand if I wasn't from that culture. But they don't care because they're not trying to make the movie for my culture. They're making it so people from their culture can actually have a movie in their culture that they can understand.
Yeah, in the end, it's not about what you look like or how you were born. It's what you've experienced.
Like, I am not a good candidate to write anything about Asian culture, Japanese culture. I know it as an outsider entirely. I know some amount of Southern California culture from the 80s.
Yeah, just like I can't write about Middle Eastern culture. White people just assume I know everything about Middle Easterners because I have a Middle Eastern name, but I don't. I've never been to the Middle East. So how would I know?
Well, I feel like those of us in the States just don't understand where your name comes from at all, though.
Well, now my father's gone. I'm the last Shokrizan on Earth.
Oh man, oh heavy.
But it makes it really easy to get my own Gmail account.
Oh, shit. Well, yeah, right. There's two sides of this, right? One is whether it is okay, and right, of course it's okay. The author is the author; they do what they choose, and we don't have to like it. And and so much you have to come to terms as a creator. You have to do what you choose, and you have to do it in spite of whether or not other people like it sometimes. And that's this like important kind of like life experience of someone who's chosen to commit to kind of creative endeavors. The society's point of view, it's not like that attitude doesn't work at the level of, oh well, the Germany has decided that the particular depiction of France is going to be decided by, right? That doesn't work at all. And I think as on that side of things, it really ends up being upon the audience to simply accept or not, right? That you vote with your engagement. That I don't like this expression, and that's okay. And I don't have to agree with you liking it or not, right? There can be we have different perspectives in that regard. Now, but the flip side is the side that, again, I'm always so much more interested in this, is how do you optimize the outputs? And optimizing the outputs means you find the person that has it packed into their DNA with the most amount of nuance, because you're going to get better results out of that kind of stuff, just as always.
When I watch, I grew up in Black culture, grew up in locker rooms and athletics, and that was like the token white person in a lot of cases. And when I watch a Spike Lee film, I'm like, oh yeah, right on. When I watch Black Panther, if I close my eyes, I feel like I'm listening to a bunch of white people talking. So to me, that just having an all-black cast doesn't do it for me. I actually want to feel like I'm listening to people that have an African American culture, and I didn't have that experience when I watched Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter what they were wearing or how they looked. It didn't sound like it. It was all wrong.
I think in that case, though, but Black Panther is trying to convey some sort of like synthesis of African cultures, which Black America it isn't the same as that.
True. But did you feel like you were watching African culture when you saw Black Panther?
That's the thing, is I don't know.
Yeah, true. So that means you can pass just about anything for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not the discerning audience in that case, and I'm not like, I am someone who really close to never gets offended, and I think I used to use that feature of myself to say, why are you offended? Yeah. And then when I realized, I'm like, oh crap, whatever's going on in your head is just not what's going on in mine. I'm okay with what's going on with me, and I have to be okay with what's going on with you. Instead of, it's just like that statement I made about people spending money in Farmville. It's like, wow, that was insensitive.
Yeah, like, again, like, I'm the same way. Like, I am bulletproof when it comes to, like, people poking holes at me or telling me to get good all the time on streams, which I never do, right, Shark?
No, you never get good.
But yeah, I think a lot of this conversation has really come from just getting more diverse names and getting more diverse people out there to create these products and get involved in this game industry. And again, it has been just such an amazing point thanks to the independent scene. But
yeah,
I know,
and the internet.
Yep, of course. But I know we are like right at time, so I think it's time for our just like final like go around the table here for any final thoughts. So this time we'll start with Shark and go in the opposite order. So Shark, do you have any final thoughts for our topic for tonight?
in the end, like when I do my hiring and everything, I don't ask for the sex, I don't ask for the race, I don't ask where they're from, any of that information. I often find out that information later on, but I don't ask for it because in the end, none of it matters. What matters is that they're able to do the job and that they are willing to work for what I'm able to pay them, which is not much, So I meant, number one, beggars can't be choosers, and number two, I just don't care, I'm good with being friends and working with anybody who is able to, be friends and work well with me, kind of thing, And yeah.
All right.
My next means your culture has to be diverse. And that means just because you have a token person, token X person, token Y person, token Z person in your studio, doesn't mean they feel safe expressing their personal culture, because you still may have a monoculture. So you need to go out of your way to let them express their diversity. Let them know it's encouraged. Just like the female partner I have on in my new studio. If I don't hear her speaking up, I stop and say, "Hey, I really would like your input," because without that safety space, it just may not happen.
All right.
Yeah. To me, diversity is a superpower. It is really representative of how to best solve problems. Like when you find yourself dumped in in an unknown kind of information state, you don't figure it out faster by sticking to the way things have been. And the way I benefit, the way I grow, the way I think faster and more effectively is, really in some ways, in a maybe selfish way, stealing from the diversity of the world around me. And so it's this essential component of how I approach things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think same thing, like echoing that thought, Tomo, that it really has come down to being able to talk to more developers and just see that there are perspectives other than my own out there. And again, I think I was like the same way about mobile games as well, like 15, 20 years ago. Who the hell are these people? What is going on with these games? Why are they in this industry? And I think, again, so much of my growth has been being able to talk to so many developers and just kind of see what it's like to be in this space. And not just in terms of diversity, but in terms of game development as well. Like, the only reason that I can talk comfortably about design is that I speak to people who make the games. And I always love it when I get to talk to people from different cultures and just see what it's like in this industry all around the world. But I think that will take us to the end. So, to Honest Rogue's comment, yeah, if we can come up with another like part 2 for this, we can certainly figure something out. And we still don't know what our title will be for next month. We usually put these out very quickly. So, if anyone has any suggestions for next month's topic, please let us know in the comments below. I'm curious to see what the comments on this video is going to be when this goes up in recorded form. I'll be sure to let you guys know of all the, very happy-go-lucky comments that I get here. And
there will probably be plenty of those.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully Jack will be able to join us. I know he said he was like wrapping up, I think, teaching for the semester, I think in March. So hopefully we can get him back on for next month's cast. So, as always, for our final round the table, just a quick mention of, any social media like to plug, projects, etc. So for myself, again, if you are new, check out the Discord and Patreon. Be sure to like, subscribe, smash whatever kind of buttons you want to hit here. And if you are interested in my books on design, my third book on roguelike design will be out in early April, and then horror sometime later this year. I have no idea when. But of course, you can follow me on Twitter at GWBicer. And that does it for me. So, up to Tomo.
Yeah, so my studio is called Hyperkinetic Studios. We make a game that's in early access on Steam presently, and we stream development 3 times a week at Twitch TV/Epic Tavern, where we actually discuss a lot of issues like this, but mostly from the perspective of how it affects the characters in the game. And our Discord channel at discord.gg/Epic Tavern, we like typing about it or chatting about it. And you can find me at Tomo Moriwaki. That's my Twitter handle that I never look at.
All right, Ramin.
I've recently formed a studio called Cloudwalker with 2 partners. I'm advanced in the design of a game called Star Garden, which is designed to be hyper social, to bring together a team almost like a family to cooperate through progression content of at least 2 years that we've already designed out. And in parallel, in cooperation with Dr. Paul Zak and now also Dr. Mike Zaida, we're building another game alongside it called Superstar Garden that was going to actually let you use your mind to some extent to talk to the game. And that's going to be like Matrix 0.1.
So I'm Sharky, and I have my Discord where we definitely talk about game design as well as my games. My team's games rather. We have our YouTube channel where we stream game development as well as podcasts similar to this one. And we have Twitter. Nexus Games INC1, and all of the links to everything will be down in the description.
All right. So everyone, that is going to do it for this month's roundtable. If everything goes accordingly, Tomo and I will be having one of our chats later this week. And again, if you have any suggestions for topics going forward, please get in touch. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, everybody, have a great night.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye, guys.